Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfree, and as usual, I am your host. Uh, very short episode last week, about 30 minutes. Gonna be longer this week. We have a big pay-per-view to preview. We're talking UFC 280. That's gonna take up, I imagine, the bulk of the time here. But not only that, there was UFC on ESPN Plus 70 this last Saturday. Pretty big weekend in the world of boxing I want to talk very briefly about because I want to talk about it, and I can. And then some news. A lot of it gonna fall into like one or two categories, but a few things to talk about. So before we get going, as always, please interact with the product any way you can. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review. If you've done any and all of that, please share. That's the best way to help the show. Tell people you know online, tell people you know in person, anything that you can do to kind of point them in our direction and let the show try to win them over. So, thank you very much in advance. Deeply appreciate all of you for listening. Shouldn't take too long. UFC on ESPN Plus 70. Um, During fight week, we lost the two most interesting fights on this card. I mentioned this before in the preview, actually. I was very much looking forward to Daniel Rodriguez and Neil Magny. That got moved. There was an injury to Daniel Rodriguez. Hopefully he heals up. But he had an elbow injury. I'll double check that. Yeah, an elbow infection. I might have mentioned that last week. That one might have fallen off beforehand, so maybe the last 2 weeks. That's currently scheduled for an upcoming event in November. That actually just lost its main event. They rescheduled that for UFC Fight Night 214. This was originally supposed to be headlined by uh, Bryce Mitchell and Movsar Evloev, which is a darn good fight. Unfortunately, Evloev had to fall out, had some kind of an injury. Not official yet, but news coming out of all camps is that Ilya Topuria is replacing Evloev. That's a good fight. That's still a good fight. It's not quite. I don't think that's quite what it used to be. I was very much looking forward to Evloev and Mitchell. I thought they would have the grappling between those two would have been something. Topuria might be. There's more like blunt force trauma threat from Topuria. He's a much better striker. But I don't think there's quite as much parity across the board as there would have been with because if Mitchell doesn't have a great advantage in the wrestling and grappling, and I don't think he would have over Evloev. It doesn't mean he couldn't have beaten him that way, but does he have a big advantage there? I don't think so. Um, Topuria is much more of a striker. Again, I'm not complaining about this for the record. Topuria is very good. So it's just not quite what it used to be. How does that card look, by the way? That's not going to draw a ton of interest. Um, Certainly not. It's not going to draw almost any, uh, you know, casual interest, but there's some decent stuff there. Yeah, that's actually not a bad card. That's supposed to take place November 5th. We will preview that, of course, before it happens. But during like the day of weigh-in, so day before, Askar Askarov and Brandon Royval fell out. There was a weight cutting issue with Askarov. He told everyone, "I'm not going to make weight." I don't know what exactly happened there. Then I take this with a grain of salt because the way it was spun was they offered a catch weight of I forget what it was. Again, this is all kind of hearsay. But in theory, there was a catch weight offered that Askarov still turned down. Now, this immediately, because of how it was reported and fighters being fighters, kind of got memed on. Who's gonna miss weight and then won't accept a catch weight fight? And if that's what happened, then fair enough. Like that's a bad look. Uh, the flip side of that happens to be if whatever he was dealing with that caused him to miss weight was serious enough, then, you know, that might have been more it. And that it was medically inadvisable for him to actually go through with the fight. I've been a pretty big, I'm a pretty vocal believer in the fighting ability of Mr. Askarov. But uh, that that guy's got to get some stuff sorted out. He's had weight issues before this one. This is not a first time. He missed weight for his fight with Joseph Benavidez. He weighed 127 for that. He's also had some real lack of activity. He fought twice in 2020, pretty good. Only fought once in 2021, and then fought over a year later in 2022. He's been dealing with some injuries apparently, and there's a real argument that he came back against Kai Kara-France a bit too soon from what he should have been. So if he's dealing with health issues, I hope he gets them sorted out. But he does need to sort that out. So we were down to a 5-fight main card, which I think might be the ideal main card. I mean, main card distinctions in the age of, entirely UFC, streaming platforms. I don't know that the distinction matters all that much, but that feels better. There were only 11 fights here, and the pacing for the main card in particular I thought was pretty darn good, especially with some of the time that they had to fill. But so anyway, that's kind of how we arrived at the fight card we're going to talk about. Main event. Alexa Grasso defeats Viviane Araújo via unanimous decision, 50-45 and then 49-46 twice. No issue with any of that. I was 50-45, but was it the first round? I think the first round there might be an argument for Araújo. You know what? Let me find the actual scorecards just in case I have to yell at somebody. Okay, yeah, one of these so Sal D'Amato, our resident semi-sentient can of soup, gave Araújo the fourth, which I don't agree with. And Junichiro Kamijo gave her the third. I also don't agree with. I might be more accepting of the fourth than the third. Surprised no one gave her the first. I thought that was probably the closest. I'm glad no one gave her the second, because the takedowns that Araújo had meant nothing. So yeah, sorry, Sal D'Amato gave her the fourth, Kamijo the third. Am I more sympathetic to the fourth than the third? Just thinking back on it, I think I am. As far as the media goes, yeah, no one scored this for Araújo. Couple of people scored it 3-2. The majority are either 5-0 or 4-1. So, not a terrible fight. What do I want to say about the fight? Again, it wasn't terrible. Lot of jabbing from both women. Grasso just seemed to be a little bit busier, which was kind of the difference maker here. Just more activity, more efficacy. She landed more often. I think Araújo probably had a little bit more punching power, but once Araújo struggled to really do anything, she struggled to get takedowns. When she got them, she struggled to do anything with them. And if she couldn't make that work, then that was always going to be a rough night for her. Both women landed because neither woman has great defense. Better footwork out of Grasso, I think, played a pretty big role in this. Neither woman did a tremendous amount of kicking, some, but not a lot. Good enough win for Grasso. This gives her, 4 in a row, I think. We're going to have to wait for UFC 280 to really get some clarity about the top of women's flyweight, because you've got the fight between Caitlin Chookagian and Manon Fior that's going to take place at that event. And if Chukagian wins, they'll probably go with Grasso because Chukagian is um, she's kind of the John Fitch of flyweight. She doesn't wrestle like John Fitch did, but she just has these relatively uninteresting fights. She's good enough to win, and she's a good gatekeeper. But I think I heard Luke Thomas say this about the John Fitch road to getting a title shot. The John Fitch road to getting a title shot is you just win a lot until you can't be denied anymore. And you don't care how exciting your fights are, how much the UFC likes it, how much the fans like it. You keep winning and you'll get there eventually. And you will, but the downside to that is if you'd go that route, you only get one shot. John Fitch never got all that close to another title shot after his first fight with Anderson, or not, sorry, GSP. I'm thinking about Rich Franklin too. Now, Rich Franklin did get a second shot at Anderson, but Franklin also he had a lot more goodwill with the UFC brass than John Fitch did. Um, but Franklin also wound up in the perennial position of I can't beat Anderson Silva, but I can beat a lot of the other guys who were just perennial gatekeeper. Chukagian could easily fall into that role too. The long and the short of that being, Chukagian's probably not getting another title shot unless she does something truly kind of exceptional. If she just gets another traditional Caitlin Chukagian win, they'll go with Grasso. Uh, I think the UFC is kind of hoping Fior wins. You could easily, and I do mean easily, headline I don't know if you could do a full pay-per-view, but you could headline a more major fight night in France with Shevchenko and Fior. That's very reasonable. Reasonable. Again, could you main event a pay-per-view with that? No, but you could co-main. You'd need something else to really draw in kind of the casual fans. But if you wanted to throw a title fight on, again, an ESPN card, Shevchenko versus Fior in France, certainly, that certainly is doable. So Grasso might get one. She might need one more. Again, there's a little bit of stuff up in the air for her here, but she's undefeated at flyweight. And honestly, if she doesn't get if her next fight is not for the title, she's only one away. If she wins one more, and that's 5 in a row, and in a division that shallow, you could easily put her in a title shot. Other moving parts in there, but this was a solid enough performance. Not great, but her feet looked better, her footwork looked good. She looked like she could fight 5 rounds without too much difficulty, which is a big thing. Her boxing's always been pretty darn good. Bit of a headhunter. Her jab is really nice. I kind of echo some sentiments I've seen. I wish she jabbed to the body a little bit more, because she doesn't have enough power to really kind of start you on the feet. And if you don't have that, working the body is a very viable path because that kind of accumulates better than head damage for some reason. You can also time stuff to the body a little bit easier. It's an easier target. But not a bad main event. Araujo just looked a little bit one-dimensional. She had, I'm going to do a little bit of the punching with you, but she didn't kick a lot. I can't remember if it was Dominic Cruz or Paul Felder on commentary who brought it up, but one of them said, I think we're not seeing a lot of kicks because neither woman wants to give up the takedown. Grasso isn't necessarily known for her, submission acumen, but she's good enough to hold top position, and I think if that was part of the case, and I tend to think it might have been, that's a valid fear to just give up minutes and minutes and minutes of top control time to someone who kind of knows what they're doing up there. So a lot of boxing, some good enough clinch work. Grasso's clinch is pretty darn good. I don't think it gets talked about enough. She's good about framing. She's good about moving herself off the fence. She's good about finding knees, especially in the clinch. She's never passive in that position. So, good win for Grasso. A setback for Araujo, but she's young enough. And women's flyweight is not exactly brimming. It's not overflowing with talent. So I imagine she'll be back in top position relatively soon. But hopefully she can use this as a learning experience. Something else that got brought up on this about her, I mentioned this in my preview. I wasn't sure her cardio would hold up. Dean Thomas brought up that when you have power fighters like this, when they have these longer fights, to make sure they don't completely gas themselves out, they tend to mute themselves. Where normally Araujo would have a higher output or just you'd be more willing to seek the fight, fear of your cardio abandoning you leads you to, again, diminish your own offensive output, and that sometimes completely mutes your entire game. There might have been a little bit of that going on here. She was trying to regulate her energy, and the fight just kept getting further and further away from her. I don't know that she could have, gotten Grasso out of there. So I'm not saying that I know better than her coaches about how to, set these things up. I am saying I think that might be what happened. Might have been what happened. And if that's the case, maybe the calculus should change next time into going a little bit harder in different intervals instead of a just generally depressed performance. But I don't know. Again, that's going to vary fighter to fighter so wildly that I'm simply positing options. I'm not saying that she should do this, but it's an idea. But she's not going to win a lot. She will. Here's what I can say fairly confidently. She's not going to have a consistently winning record in 5-round fights if she fights like this in 5-round fights. So she's got to figure out how to do that. Whatever that happens to mean, but that is something that needs to be addressed. If you're going to be in main events, if you're going to have those extra couple of rounds, she needs to figure out how she's going to win consistently under those circumstances. Your co-main event, after everything was said and done, the bantamweight debut of Cub Swanson, who made weight, good for him, fought Jonathan Martinez. Martinez defeats Cub Swanson via leg kick TKO, 4:19 of the second round. The first round was it was going Martinez's way, but Swanson was in the fight till we get to the last little bit when Martinez hurt Swanson. Hurt him with a punch initially, then or an elbow. It was an elbow. Then as Swanson is backing up, Martinez fights southpaw most of the time, digs this nasty body kick kind of along the fence. Swanson drops. Martinez looks to finish. Not enough time in the round left though, so clear run for Martinez. Second round, Martinez slams home a couple of inside leg kicks that just the first one lands and Cub immediately kind of goes down into a deep squat. Like it hits, comes down, almost goes to a seated position, bounces back up, takes another one, same reaction, goes into southpaw. It would have been southpaw, so it goes close stance, eats a leg kick out of the lead leg. Our finishing sequence, there's a bit of an exchange on the after those two leg kicks. This happened in pretty rapid succession, actually. Martinez lands a front kick, and he's been landing pretty good body kicks, but he lands a front kick here, and Swanson's posture immediately changes. He immediately kind of hunches over, and that back elbow gets real close to the ribs. That's a guaranteed tell. If you land a body shot on somebody, and their posture changes, that's a giveaway. If one of their arms, like especially where you hit, if something drops to kind of protect that, that's almost an involuntary reaction. Means you did the job. Means you did your job there with that shot. That kind of locks Cub up for a second. Cub tries to throw back, can't quite find the target, and Martinez hits this just one last inside leg kick that just drops Swanson, kind of spins him around a little bit on the mat, and we're done. Really good performance from Jonathan Martinez here. He got hit with some punches throughout this fight. Again, this was not one-way traffic in the sort of traditional sense of that, but Martinez was the better fighter, and that was fairly obvious. I don't know. Martinez fights out of Factory X, right? Yeah. Yeah, he's got Chris Gutierrez was in his corner. I bring that up just to bring up that Mark Montoya has, I don't know how much of this is kicking power is a little bit like punching power. there's a lot that goes into it that's just kind of beyond your control. But Mark Montoya has several guys at a Factory X who have just sledgehammers for legs. You know, Chris Gutierrez has some leg kick stoppages. He kicks really hard. Jonathan Martinez, we knew this before this fight. It just became very apparent in this fight. That dude kicks like a mule. I mean, just battering you on the outside with kicks. I don't know what Mark Montoya has as far as, drilling or technique that he kind of imparts, but he's got something because he maximizes a lot of guys' kicking potential. And again, there's a degree of this that's kind of just genetic lottery, right? Trevor Whitman he's told the story before about, Justin Gaethje came into when he first started working with Gaethje. Gaethje didn't know how to fight, knew how to wrestle, but even untrained, the guy was, kicking holes in people. And obviously, once you refine that skill, it gets even more dangerous, but there is a degree of just you're born with it or you're not. Punching powers like that, because there's stuff that goes into punching power that you just don't have control over. There's a little bit of bone density that goes into it. More than that, believe it or not, hand size. Hand size is a big thing when you figure out, when kind of determining punching power. You got bigger hands, obviously there's just more mass there being flung about. Justin Gaethje's hands are very big, especially for a man his size. That's one of the things about the boxer. Smaller guy, if you look at the weight class, but the monster, Naoya Inoue. That dude has big hands. Again, especially for a guy his general build, his hands are big. And I can't call him the most he's not like the hardest puncher in the sport raw. But if you go pound for pound, man, he might be. He's certainly near the top. That dude was a destroyer when he hits you. He does it in get the gloves that he did it in. But I was watching one of his fights with my friend Pat, who's been on the show before. And Pat mentioned before the commentary brought up the same point, he's hurting this guy in these gloves, and I forget the name brand, but he said, and I've used those. They're basically pillows. Different brands of glove have different. There's just kind of nuance to some of those, and some of them are just softer than others, and that's not a bad thing. Sometimes you want those for to protect your hands a little bit more for bag work sometimes, or for sparring if you're going lighter. That there's a lot of reasons why you would go with different types of gloves, and just if you're able to generate that kind of power in historically some of the softest gloves. I don't mean soft like thin. I mean soft like, okay, I don't mind getting hit by those. You got power. And Martinez has power in his kicks, man. You can see it. You can hear it. Big win for him. He's a very soft-spoken guy. He almost seems a little bit shy once whoever's. This was not just this fight. This is a trend with him. Not a big talker, but big win for him. I think he called anyone out because he usually doesn't. Let me double check that. I feel like there might have been somebody that he mentioned. Yeah, give me a sec. Let me double check. Yes, he did, because Dominic Cruz was on commentary for the event. And he says, "I know Dominic Cruz is here. I'd love to have that fight." Cruz was complimentary of the guy's on the mic, so Brandon Fitzgerald afterwards says, Dominic Cruz right here. What do you think? Because of course you're going to bring it up. There's no reason not to address it. And Cruz just was very complimentary of Martinez. Just good on you. Keep going. Keep doing what you. He's clearly kind of sorting some stuff out about what he wants next for his career. So he wasn't really in a position for a variety of reasons to just say yes, let's do it and whatnot. But if they make that fight, be a good fight. I like Dominic Cruz a lot, but as hard as Martinez kicks, man, and as much as Cruz has struggled with that on occasion, depending on some other things, it's a thought. I'm very excited for what Martinez does next either way. He's making that transition from prospect to contender. That's a hard bridge to cross. There's a lot of dead bodies that have tried to cross, maybe the no man's land in comparison is better, so I don't mix my metaphors too much. Moving from prospect to contender, there's a big no man's land there before you get to the next series of trenches that are relative safety. Relative. There's a lot of bodies there. Lot of bodies between those two locations. Of guys who you thought were good prospects and can't miss and just never got there. For whatever reason. There's a lot of bodies there. And he seems to be making the move, so good for him. As for Cub Swanson, what am I going to say about Cub Swanson, man? He's past his prime. He's 38. I mean, he's almost 39, actually. He'll be 39, yeah, not too long from here in November. I mean, the guy's been fighting forever. I talked about it last week. He debuted in 2004, which is the year I graduated from high school. This guy started fighting professionally. Been with the WEC/UFC since 2007. Good long runs of wins, tough losses, but that dude always came to fight. He's got some good wins on his resume, too, for the record. He knocked out Charles Oliveira. Let's have some of the good wins he's got. His win over Doo-Ho Choi that's a great fight. One that stood out. That knockout of George Roop is brutal. He had that win over Dustin Poirier that actually sent Poirier up from featherweight. His fight with Frankie Edgar's pretty good. He lost that one, but it's a pretty good fight. They were hyping up his win over Darren Elkins, which he got December of last year. It was a fight before this one. And I wanted to laugh a little bit because of how they were phrasing it. They were talking about, his accuracy is great and Cub Swanson's back, and the guy he hit Darren Elkins so much, and I kind of wanted to go, you're missing the point. Like, hitting Darren Elkins isn't impressive. The man has negative defense. Like, straight up negative. I feel like he moves into strikes. What's impressive wasn't hitting Darren Elkins as much as he did. What was impressive was stopping him, because that's hard to do. Hitting Darren Elkins, anybody can do it. I feel pretty confident in the following. If I were to spar with Darren Elkins, one, he would beat the crap out of me. But I would hit him before he did. I'd get smashed, man. I'm not saying I'm a tough guy. I'm saying that to say that's how little his defense is. Someone with moderate, I'm going to really stress moderate training, could land on him with a degree of consistency before succumbing to him being a professional and his wrestling game and whatnot. But could I hit him if we sparred? Yes, I could. And then I'd get smashed. Again, not bragging on myself here at all. But what was impressive about what Cub did wasn't that he landed, but that he finished. That was much more impressive than just landing, because everybody hits Darren Elkins. I don't know if Cub's going to stick around at bantamweight or not. He's just past his prime. He's in this weird spot where he's clearly not, he's not going to make a run at the belt. He could retire, and we'd all rightly celebrate his career. I don't think his career is Hall of Fame worthy, but he definitely deserves to be remembered. And one of his fights is in the Hall of Fame, deservedly so. He could retire, but he's also still good enough to be competitive. This was a rough matchup for him, so if he does stick around at bantamweight's hard for him. That's a deep division. But he might be able to find a few older names at bantamweight that he could kind of try his hand with. Cub can kind of do what he wants at this point. If he wants to be done, okay, I'll give that man his flowers all day long. If he wants to keep going, I don't think he's at a point where it's inadvisable for him to continue. That's probably closer than we think, but I just haven't seen him be there yet. You just have to be careful with expectations and matchmaking. But good win for Martinez. Dushko Todorovic defeats Jordan Wright via TKO, punches and elbows from the mount, basically. Was it mount? Yeah, it was mount. 3:12 of the second. Good first round for Jordan Wright. Pushed things into a clinch. They fought there. He got takedowns, good top control, a lot of mat returns. Todorovic came out after the second and fought like he normally does. So pushed close. Wright seemed to gas. Pocket fighting, body shots. Eventually got him down, got on top, and Wright was so gassed that full mount might as well have been death. And it was. This was your fight of the night. Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. I think it deserved it. This wasn't one of those events where you look down the thing and go, oh man, none of these things deserve fight of the night. I think this probably got there. I mean, it clearly did for the people who make those decisions. Not a whole lot there. I mean, again, this was kind of fun, but I don't have a whole lot to go. I don't have a lot to say about it. Bantamweight, much needed win. Rafael Assunção defeats Victor Henry via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Good stuff from Assunção. He kind of got Henry to keep coming forward, was able to counter him. Got some takedowns at points in time. Little bit of control, little bit of ground and pound. Just very, very solid, crafty veteran outing from Assunção here. He needed that win bad. I don't know exactly what's next for him. I don't know exactly where he fits into the division, but the line on this one had Henry as a pretty big favorite. I want to say minus 400 or so. And I get it. Assunção had lost, 4 in a row? And it did not look like things were getting better. The only counterpoint here is you look at the level of opposition. Marlon Moraes, Corey Sandhagen, Cody Garbrandt, and Ricky Simone. Now, Garbrandt, not exactly going the best of directions himself these days. But Simone's on the upswing, and Corey Sandhagen is he's one of the 5 best bantamweights in the world, in my opinion. So there's a degree of, level of opposition that has to be taken into account there. But, and I don't know that I would have bet on Assunção. I don't think I picked him. But those odds might have been a bit too wide. Just going to phrase it like that if you're an odds guy. Henry's new enough to the UFC and whatnot that I don't know. I don't think we also had enough evidence of Assunção slipping quite the way that you did with like Renan Barão. Because I remember I picked Andre Ewell to beat Renan Barão. Because I just thought Barão was done at that point. I didn't think Assunção was done, and I still don't. So odds being that wide was a little bit of a surprise, but Assunção needed the win. Solid performance. Good on him. Light heavyweight Alonzo Menefield knocked out Misha Cirkunov with punches, 128 of the first. Whatever. It's light heavyweight. What do you want me to say? Cirkunov, hey. Remember when I mentioned that, chasm of bodies that litter the trenches between prospect and contender? Yeah, Cirkunov's one of those guys. I think technically he might have been ranked at one point, but that's a guy who showed a lot of potential, a lot of ability, and then just never quite made the leap. Solid win for Menefield, but I don't have a whole lot to add here. That was your main card. For the prelims, Mana Martinez defeated Brandon Davis via split decision. The split surprised me here. Don't quite know how you got 2 rounds for Davis. Not a bad little fight, though. Middleweight. This one a little bit surprised me, actually. Jacob Malkoun defeats Nick Maximo via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. The determining factor here seemed to be that Maximov... Do we have an update on this thing? Let me see if there's an update on his condition, because he got hurt in this. Okay, I don't think we have a specific update as far as the injury, but there was clearly an injury to his right leg. Sometime in the first round, it happened. He started grimacing in pain as he was walking around. He survived the round. He got out wrestled. Between rounds, he told his corner my knee popped. His corner told him to get suck it up and get back out there. I believe part of the inspirational line was, "You're from Stockton, right?" He is. He fights out of the Nick Diaz Academy, I believe, but inadvisable. Inadvisable. He goes back out, gets out wrestled again. I mean, he could not defend a single leg, and you can't if you've got a compromised knee to that degree, and if it popped the way he kind of describes, that's probably some kind of a ligament issue. My hunch. I couldn't tell you which one, but that would be my hunch. All you have to do is grab the good leg, force them to try and put all of their weight on the bad leg, and then just, a little bit of an inside trip. And Malkoun's good at that takedown anyway. Just easy work getting that takedown. I mean, uh, Maximov couldn't even close guard. Like when he had full guard, could not close it properly because his right knee was so messed up. His corner talked to him about stopping it between rounds 2 and 3. They said, "I need to see more from you, or I'm just going to throw on the towel." I don't know what more they saw in the third, but it was apparently enough. Dude, I've said this before, man. MMA corners are just they're never going to stop a fight. I can probably count on one hand the number of times I can recall a fight being stopped by the corner. They don't do it. And they're not going to until something really bad happens. That's just how it is. Yeah, Maximo, he wasn't even in the ring when they read the scores. Like he was badly limping and very obviously in a lot of pain. But good win for Malkoun, who's not going to win too many popularity contests, but he's a pretty solid wrestler, and he's a determined guy. He's like primary training partners with Robert Whittaker. So, uh, solid win. Solid win for Malkoun. Featherweight, Joanderson Brito defeated Lucas Alexander via rear naked choke, 202 of the first. Brito's pretty legit. He got right after Alexander, got the back standing, hit some mat returns before jumping for the back, fighting for the choke. Just really good stuff out of Brito here. Women's strawweight, Piero Rodriguez defeated Sam Hughes via unanimous decision, 29-20 across the boards. I believe first two for Rodriguez, last one for Hughes. Not a lot here. Hughes struggled to really kind of maintain consistent offensive output. Rodriguez was the heavier-handed fighter. She gassed, but Hughes never really was able to capitalize on it. So, yeah. Let's see, Tatsuro Taira defeated CJ Vergara via armbar, 419 of the second. I told you guys when Taira debuted that I was a little bit high on him. I liked what I'd seen out of him. He had a pretty good record. I mean, it was smaller promotional work, but undefeated, pretty talented guy, and plenty of people who knew a lot more than I do were telling us all, watch this guy. He looked good here. Won the first round without too much difficulty. Second round, gets another takedown, gets the back. Can't quite find the choke, and ultimately decides it's better to go for the armbar, which he gets. Armbars from the back are criminally underused in MMA. Fighters are terrified of losing the position. And I'm not even saying that's an unfounded fear, for the record. But that's an offensive weapon that you need to have in your arsenal. Otherwise, you got nothing. If somebody's good at hand fighting and you're on their back, congratulations, you're not doing anything. Having a secondary point of attack like that is a very useful thing to have in your offensive repertoire. And being later in the round, I'm sure contributed to it. Like, okay, if I lose position, I've still won the round. Fair enough. That's a legitimate consideration. But really nice armbar, man. Taira he's legit. After the fight, he said he wants to be the first Japanese UFC champion, which he would be if he's able to get there. And flyweight, again, is he going to do that this year? Within the next, call it 18 months. Is he going to do that by 2024? Let me put it this way. He won't do it in 2023. I feel pretty confident about that. But so we're looking at, another 18 months or so would be my guess before he's like, there's no reason to rush this guy. He's got ability. Let's let him develop. But he might be able to do it, for the record. And kicking everything off, Pete Rodriguez knocked out Mike Jackson, knocked him out of the UFC would be my guess, with a brutal knee against the fence, as expected. I mean, look, I'm not gonna sit here and completely clown on Mike Jackson, but his tenure in the UFC lasted at least 2 fights more than it should have. Let me just put it that way. Yeah, Rodriguez just battered him, got him against the fence. Jackson was trying to weave under hooks, which is not a bad idea. It's a good thing. In fact, it's a good skill to possess if you can kind of get under them. But you've got to be careful changing your levels like that consistently, especially when knees get involved. And Rodriguez got him ducking and just crushed him with a knee. A pretty brutal knockout. Yeah, that was the card. Your bonuses, I mentioned fight of the night was Todorovic and Wright. Performances went to Jonathan Martinez and Tatsuro Taira. No real argument with that. Rodriguez might have been a little bit hard done there. Because I mean, again, there's preference that comes into this, and level of opposition might have been part of this factor. I don't know. But if there's someone who you might have said, maybe could have deserved it, Rodriguez would have been the next guy, I think. Yeah, over Manafield because Rodriguez's win was prettier. Sue me. So that was the event. If you want my full report, it is in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. That includes my round-by-round scoring and clips of the finishes when I can find them. So give that a read if you're so inclined. All right, let's talk boxing. Boxing had a pretty big weekend, actually. There were several events that went on Saturday. Clarissa Shields got a win over, what's her face? Hang on, let me find the name. Savannah Marshall. Now, did she beat Savannah Marshall? On that same card, that fight was supposed to take place, how long ago? It was supposed to happen like the week the Queen of England died. It was going to take place in the UK because Marshall rather, excuse me, is British. British? Some variety. Yeah, British. So that got pushed back because the Queen died. But she wins a pretty clear-cut unanimous decision. Did Shields, not a terrible fight, slightly better fight. Same card. Michaela Mayer defeated Alicia Baumgardner. Split decision. This was a fun little fight. Wait, sorry, Mayer lost. God, I got that backwards. Mayer was the one who threw a fit about it. Baumgardner, again, wins a split decision. I'm okay. You can argue either way. I have no issues with Baumgardner winning. I kind of favored her, personally. Here's the big thing that you need to take away from this, everybody. Dear boxing commissions, stop with this 2-minute round nonsense for female boxers. Stop it. There's no reason for it. None. Absolutely none. I don't know why you do this. I don't know why you think this is a good idea. It's not. Stop it. Give them 3-minute rounds. There's no reason not to. Absolutely no reason. Here's the only reason you haven't done it. The inertia of your existence. Changing rules in boxing is like pulling teeth. And if you've ever tried to get a dentist to actually pull your teeth, that's like pulling teeth. Dentists don't like doing it. I don't know why, but they don't. Actually, I do know why, but my cynical take on that can wait. There's no reason for female boxers to be fighting for 2 minutes around. None. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Give them 3 minutes a round. Nothing bad will happen. I promise. If female MMA fighters can fight for 5 minutes a round just like the guys, there's no reason female boxers can't fight for 3 minutes a round just like the guys. This is stupid. Stop it. Also on the boxing side of things, slightly more relevant to the general boxing discussion, Devin Haney fought in his mandatory rematch with George Kambosos Jr. Went to Australia, beat Kambosos to become the undisputed lightweight champion. He has all 4 belts, unified, undisputed. You have to use different terminology in boxing. Because unified is all, if you have more than one, you're unified. So, he's got all 4 belts now. When he beat Kambosos, the thing to get that fight, he had to agree to an immediate rematch once again in Australia if he won. So we got that. There was no buzz for this fight. These two guys, man, they booked this rematch pretty quick. Their fight was, what, 4 months ago? Something like that. It was this year. Haney looked rough at the weigh-ins. Like, I don't know if he's as young as he is, he's in his 20s, early 20s. Like, 135 was never going to be his permanent home. But he can't fight 135 on this schedule. Like, his body just needs time to recover. So I don't know if he's moving up next. He will at some point, I'm sure, move to 140. But at the moment, 135 is still kind of, he's the king. Whether or not he chooses to move up or fight Vasily Lomachenko remains to be seen. But his 2 options now at 135 are Lomachenko or Shakur Stevenson. So, but the fight itself gave away the ending. Yeah, he wins a unanimous decision. The most you can give Kambosos, and 2 judges did this, by the way, the most you could give Kambosos is 2 rounds. Thought Kambosos had the first. He came out doing a lot of stance switching, which I don't think Haney was ready for. Made it more of a fight, and Haney's style of boxing is the kind where he doesn't seem to hate punting the first round or so, as long as he gets what he needs out of it to be successful for the rest of the fight. And you could argue the 12th for Kambosos. I would have still given the 12th to Haney, but the 12th you can argue. That's it. Haney won the rest of the rounds. Once Haney got a read on the timing of Kambosos, he started punching him in the face a lot. His right hand was money. More than his jab, even. The right hand was kind of the story of this fight, although he did jab a great deal at Kambosos as well. He cut Kambosos up. He got cut a little bit. The 9th round, I think Kambosos had some pretty good flurries. But Haney just really good. Haney wanted the finish here. Couldn't get it, but he wanted it. Haney, this has to be part of the discussion coming out of this fight. Not a big puncher. He landed cleanly on Kambosos a lot in this fight. And if he had more power, he would have got the finish he wanted. Not a big power puncher, something to keep in mind. I'm not saying he's got full-on pillow fists. I think that would be a disservice to the man. But if you're landing as often as he was and you're not getting knockdowns, forget stoppages. If you can't even knock the guy down when you've hit this many clean punches, you got there's a punching power issue there. There just is. Now, it's not the end of the world, but it's something to acknowledge. I mean, he shut Kambosos down. I think Kambosos only landed double-digit punches in 2 of the 12 rounds. I mean, think about that for just a second. You got 3 minutes of boxing, and for 10 rounds, he could never put together in a 3-minute segment 10 punches that landed. Wild. Devin Haney's good. People overlook him because he's not flashy and he's a touch chinny. He got buzzed a few times in this fight. Not enough to steal the rounds for Kambosos, but if you know what to look for, again, you kind of know. Again, he felt that one. But he's very good. I don't know that I would favor him. I would favor Lomachenko to beat him. I think the footwork's just too much of a problem for Haney. And I think Lomachenko's great, obviously. I don't know about Shakur Stevenson, though. That's a tough one. But if he wants to stick around at 135, I think those are the two fights that are going to be tossed about. He's going to move up at some point again. The only question is when exactly. But for now, Devin Haney, man at 135. Had a good, again, he had a good fight here. He fought really well. Our other big boxing fight was the return of Deontay Wilder, who knocked out Robert Helenius in the first round. Wilder was light for this fight. He weighed 214 pounds. I mean, he's 6'7", and he weighs less than I do. I mean, I'm not fat. I've lost a fair bit of weight, actually. I'm rather proud of that. Yeah, I'm actually buying large clothes instead of extra large in some respects for the first time in about a decade. But I think I've told you guys this before. My general assumption at the moment is 218 plus or minus 3. 3? Yeah, 218 plus or minus. If I want to be more generous, like 218 plus or minus 5 is kind of where I believe my weight is. Once I stopped weighing myself like 2 years ago, 2 or 3. When I got my weight from like 240 to, I'm 240, man. When I got consistently down to around the 220 mark, I stopped weighing myself because the number on the scale no longer bothered me. And I don't need to weigh myself constantly if I don't care what my weight is at this point. And once I got back to that other kind of benchmark, I was fine with it. So I don't know what I weigh at the moment. Again, I kind of 218. You give me plus or minus 5, I'll probably be right. But yeah, you're more likely to be plus 5 than minus 5. Like plus 218, like plus 5 minus 3 probably. But Wilder weighing less than I do, and just kind of got Helenius to charge in on him, caught him with a right hand, and bad knockout, man. Helenius was sleeping with his eyes open. Just boom. Wilder hits really hard, man. He just does. I don't know that he's the hardest puncher ever in boxing. I don't even necessarily know that he's the hardest puncher in the heavyweight division right now. But if he's not, he's one of them. Again, I'm going to reference my friend Pat, who, ahead of the first fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, mentioned that he thought Wilder's power was overstated. Not non-existent, overstated. And those are two very different things. And with the benefit of more time, I think he might be right. Look, Helenius is like 40, was enjoying a bit of a career resurgence lately, but again, older, and got a little bit aggressive as Wilder. Dude, if Wilder could actually box, man, he's got again where you rank his power historically or whatnot is entirely up to you. If he could actually box in addition to having that kind of power, um, uh, that'd be great. Like he might legitimately be unstoppable. But his actual boxing has always been a weakness. It just is. Didn't bite him here, but again, brutal knockout. He said after the fight, there's Alexander Usyk or Andy Ruiz, who are both possibilities. My hunch would be Ruiz. Might have mentioned Joshua as well. I forget exactly what Ruiz is up to. He's got a challenger coming up. And he might have to take a mandatory. Tyson Fury's already beaten Wilder twice, put air quotes around that. So while Fury's a little bit out of the question. I mean, Fury's mucking around with, I don't know what he's doing. Fighting Derek Chisora again. Just a giant waste of everyone's time. But I imagine that Ruiz and Wilder is kind of the fight that's probably going to come up next. And I don't hate that fight, for the record. So that was some boxing results. So I figured I'd talk about those because I want to. Yeah. All right, let's move on to probably the main reason you guys are here. And if that's true, I apologize for uh, taking this long to get to it. But well, it was a whole week to talk about. So all right. UFC 280 coming your way this Saturday. Special earlier start time. I believe the main card will start at 2 p.m. Eastern. So main card starts noon my time. Prelims. Oh god, that's gonna suck. Prelims are gonna be at like 8. Ugh. Dang it. Hate waking up that early. I know, you UK fans. Like, you don't want to hear about me whining about having to wake up earlier in the morning once in a blue moon, but how many of you are watching the prelims, just for the record? I'm just throwing that out there. So yeah. I mean, it's also my time zone, you know? If I lived on the East Coast, that wouldn't be as big a deal. But I don't. I live Mountain Standard Time, so yeah. Anywho, main event. I do not have a good read on this fight, just for the record. For the vacant lightweight title, Charles Oliveira, the most recent former champion, against Islam Makhachev. I don't know about this one. Here's a couple of things that I think we need to keep in mind for this fight. The pace is going to be a big key here. Charles Oliveira fights at a breakneck pace because he's confident that if you fight him on those terms, he will find openings that he can capitalize on technically. And he's aggressive. The last few fights, he's been very aggressive. And he's made guys make mistakes. He's not as good on the back foot. I think he's realized that. I think that's why he's as aggressive as he is. He's not that good on the counter, and he's not that good backing up. He's still, to be clear, like he's still dangerous, but that is not where he excels. Um, so that's something to pay attention to. The slower the pace, the more it probably favors Makhachev. He's a bit more thoughtful of a fighter, likes more control, likes more methodical. One, here's an interesting observation about Oliveira. The the man does have the most submission wins in UFC history. But do you happen to know how many of those submissions he got from the guard? I don't mean that finished in the guard, because he has started a submission on the feet, like his guillotines in particular. He'll start there and then wind up in the guard. I mean, submissions that start in the guard and then kind of end from there, because I know the answer to this. It's only 2. Um, his armbar of Darren Elkins, which was his UFC debut. Geez, that was 12 years ago. And his win over Andy Ogle. I don't mean to imply that Charles Oliveira's jiu-jitsu is not dangerous with what I'm about to say. Please don't misunderstand me. I think his jiu-jitsu is very good. Very, very good for MMA. I think the fear around his guard might be oversold. People treat his guard like it's Chernobyl. And I don't think it's Chernobyl. Look, could he turn me into a pretzel from his back? Yes. Michael Chandler didn't have too many problems in his guard. Nearly finished him. Paul Felder had to navigate some Darce choke attempts early in the first round, but rewatch that fight, man. Felder gets on top and elbows him through the mat from guard, or half guard at the finish, I believe. You know, so my point here is like guys like Dustin Poirier or Justin Gaethje who dropped him and then just no, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight in your guard. Poirier maybe should have gone to his guard. Poirier's a very good black belt. Gage's considerations might be different because I know he's openly talked about you not being a big jiu-jitsu guy. So that consideration might be different. Again, there's always variables, but Oliveira's guard might not be as again, is it something you have to take seriously? Yes. You can't be sloppy, but it's not Chernobyl, you know? It's not like if I spend any time here I'm going to die. I think Makhachev's going to take him down, and I am curious to see what that looks like. The transition game is key. That's where Oliveira really excels. He transitions very well, and he finds openings. But I think if Makhachev gets on top in his guard, I think he'll be okay. If he gets to half guard, I think he'll be really okay. It might even be ideal for him. That affords him plenty of control, limits his vulnerabilities, the opportunities for offense. And Makhachev's grappling is quite good. I don't know that he'll submit Oliveira. He might. Oliveira's been tapped out before. People forget this, but I mean, Ricardo Lamas just caught a guillotine on him on the ground. Pettis guillotined him. That had some damage to the body to set it up. But he's been tapped. Not recently, but it has happened. Miller caught him with a knee bar years ago. So I wouldn't be shocked. Here's the other thing about this. There's no outcome for this fight that you could say that would surprise me. Oliveira early stoppage with strikes. Wouldn't surprise me. Oliveira submission. Wouldn't surprise me. Makhachev stoppage with strikes. Would not surprise me. Makhachev by submission. Would not surprise me. Either guy by decision. Doesn't surprise me. I would say a decision is more likely to go to Makhachev. The longer this fight goes, the more I think it favors Makhachev. I might be wrong about that, but that's my hunch. I don't think the pace at which Oliveira fights is sustainable for 5 rounds. Mostly because he fights at a pretty bonkers pace. But that's a hunch I've got. I think if you can survive the onslaught, and it is an onslaught, and some of the very best guys in the world have not been able to do this. But I don't know that he can carry that same style all 5 rounds. It's a big ask. And I think Makhachev's style is built to go long. Um, so the pace is going to be a big key for me here. The, the more methodical and the longer it goes, the more I think Makhachev will be winning. But Oliveira is very, very dangerous. He's got good power. He's got a nasty clinch game. He's developed that recently. Just will chew you up with knees. Again, he's inviting you for takedowns, and I think Makhachev will oblige him if given the opportunity. Um, the clinch will be interesting to me because Oliveira likes to operate out of more of the double collar tie, right? Whereas Makhachev is more of a Greco-Roman kind of chest-to-chest guy. Or you call it Sambo, call it whatever you want to call it. But he does more upper body stuff than kind of the tie fighting for the neck control. And that's a like age-old fight. Like which of these is better and who can make it work more for them in whatever way you want to kind of spin that. So I don't have a good read on this fight, guys. I don't know what else to tell you. This could go either way. I would not bet anything on this fight. I'm going to lean towards Makhachev just a little bit. For a pretty simple reason. Again, not going to be surprised if Oliveira wins. I lean ever so slightly. Oliveira hasn't faced a strong wrestler in a while. Probably since the Kevin Lee fight. And Lee took that first round from Oliveira, if memory serves. I have to double check that, and Oliveira, again, dealt with that very well and started to show the form that would lead him onto this run he's on, which is his run right now is one of the all-timers. Like, I don't know exactly where you want to put it, but it's really good. I mean, he's beaten, what is it? Kevin Lee, let me look it up. I want to say it's like Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson. Let me look up the ones that matter, because he beat Clay Guida and Christos Giagos and Jim Miller in 2018 and David Tamer. Like, I'm not saying those don't matter because they mattered to get him to where he is, but yeah. Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and couldn't finish Tony. He did not finish Tony Ferguson. Almost finished him with that armbar in the first round. I still don't know how Tony didn't tap. But he finished Lee, Chandler, Poirier, and Gaethje. That's a heck of a thing. It's a heck of a run. If you take his overall win streak, again, it's what? 10 fights? Hang on, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, Guida, Giagos, Miller, Tamer, Nick Lentz, Jared Gordon, Kevin Lee, Ferguson, Chandler, Poirier. Yeah. That's a heck of a run. Makhachev, by contrast, through no fault of his own, in some respects, has not had a great win over a really ranked guy. Now, again, some of this is not his fault. You know, when he beat Thiago Moises, who was ranked, I believe. He beat Dan Hooker, who was ranked, and he kind of ran over Hooker. If you'll recall, the Bobby Green fight, which was his most recent win, was February of this year. That was not supposed to be Bobby Green. That was supposed to be Beneil Dariush, who was a highly ranked, who's a ranked fighter, and I think is rather highly ranked. In fact, he's on this card. Would have been a great fight. I'm so sad that fight fell through. So he's signed to fight some top guys, and it just hasn't quite materialized. But I don't know how Oliveira is going to deal with a consistent wrestling attack. I think he's operating under the assumption that his jiu-jitsu game will counteract it. And I'm not certain that it will. I might be wrong about that, but that's kind of a hunch. I also, again, I question Oliveira's conditioning given the pace at which he likes to fight over 5 rounds. I think that's a big question mark. Might not matter. Might end early. And we might still have that big question mark. But my hunch is that his style, if he can't get control positions throughout the course of a round and kind of reload, I don't know how sustainable it is. Look what happens when he fought. The Poirier fight's a good example of this. He fought like a bat out of hell for the first round. Dropped the first round, I thought. But second round, again, they're both swinging hell for leather. He gets a takedown and he kind of just rides out the round on top. He's doing good work and he's landing elbows. He's still doing stuff. I don't mean to say this was lay and pray, but he's not quite, again, in the frantic energy expenditure that he is on the feet. If he has to fight stand up for 5 rounds, I don't know that what he does is sustainable. So I'm going to lean ever so slightly to Makhachev, but I have no idea. Like, that's just a prediction. That's a pick because it's kind of what I do here, but I don't know. It's a really good fight. Another fight I'm not quite sure on, in a lot of ways, actually. Your co-main event for the bantamweight title, champion Aljamain Sterling defends against former champion TJ Dillashaw. Dillashaw is trying to become a 3-time bantamweight champion. If you'll recall, he won the vacant belt? No, he beat Renan Barão when Barão was promoted from interim champion. Lost it to Dominic Cruz. Regained it from Cody Garbrandt, and then was stripped of the title after failing that drug test when he cut down to flyweight and was stopped by Henry Cejudo. So, did not lose the title the second time. It was taken from him. His own fault. And just for the record, his own fault. I'm saying nobody beat him for it. I'm torn on this one because I can see the arguments for either guy. Oh, for the record, the like the pre-fight hype package that they showed the kind of again the kind of their hype job for this fight on the card last night. Sterling and Dillashaw might be the two least likable guys in a title fight in a long time. I mean, you've got Sterling kind of palling around in Abu Dhabi taking pictures with Andrew Tate. That waste of space. Um, I'm not even going to give that guy airtime beyond noting that. And then you've got Dillashaw, who's just, you know, Dillashaw, much like Conor McGregor, desperately wishes he were 6 feet tall. Just desperately. Of course, if Dillashaw were 6 feet tall, he'd be like the biggest jackass in the world. Certainly one of them. So very unlikable personalities. Was the point there. Very, very, very good fighters, though. I didn't think Dillashaw beat Corey Sandhagen in their fight, for the record. I scored that for Sandhagen. I don't think scoring it for Dillashaw it's not egregious, but I disagreed. So he's getting this a little bit. I mean, he's getting this based off of never having lost the title and a win that's a little over a year old. And oh man, the injuries. I mean, this guy's dealt with a metric ton of injuries. During his suspension, like I think he had both shoulders operated on and might have had one knee. Then he had the knee surgery after the fight with Sandhagen when Sandhagen hit a heel hook that tore something in his knee. I forget exactly what, but something. Here's the problem, I think, for Sterling. Logically, this should be Aljamain Sterling, right? He's the younger fighter. He's on the better run. Dillashaw's, again, older. He looked a step slower in the Sandhagen fight. Some of Dillashaw's style has kind of been figured out at this point. Like, the game has caught up to him. Whether it's surpassed him or not remains to be seen, but he's not operating at the cutting edge anymore, necessarily. Here's the problem with Sterling. As far as this matchup goes. Right? Sterling's striking game from the outside is okay, but it's a lot of single shot. He fights long, and he's a very lanky guy for the division, and he has learned how to use that, to his credit. But it's a lot of single shots, and he's not comfortable in exchanges. Dillashaw is, and that's a big consideration. I think Dillashaw being slowed down a little bit will help Sterling in this case, but it's still a consideration. Sterling's bread and butter is not his striking, it's his grappling, and it's specifically his ability to get the back, because he is very good at it. Whatever you think about how the fight with his most recent fight with Jan was scored, and I believe doing it live I scored it for Jan, but I don't know, that might have been... I'm not sure that was correct. I'm pretty sure it was wrong. Rewatching that fight, I'm much more like, yeah, Sterling probably won that. I understand the argument for Jan, I do, but I don't think it's correct anymore. But watch some of the back takes that Sterling hits in that fight. They're brilliant. Because Sterling is doing something that a lot of other guys are getting a little bit hip to, especially guys who operate more in the Khabib meta. They're not looking to take you down and advance position in the traditional sense of the word. Sterling in particular is only looking for you to expose your back and give him an opportunity to take it. And that's very, very different from how a lot of guys operate. That's what Sterling likes to do, and he is very good at it. His back control when he gets there is exceptional. It's very hard to get him off. He's not always the most... I'm going to phrase this carefully because he does kind of what I mentioned a little bit earlier. He will not give up that position. You could hang your arm out there for him to take, and he is not going to take it. He's not going to take the chance. He'll just keep trying to choke you. And if that means he just wins the round, then fine, he just wins the round. His ground and pound isn't anything to write home about, but it's not terrible, especially if he can kind of belly you down. He can do some good work from there. But TJ Dillashaw is hard to get down. Not impossible, hard. Dillashaw's stance is a very awkward stance. It's almost like what I referred to as kind of like a monkey stance, where his base is a little bit wide, his hips are back, and he kind of leans forward at the waist and presents his head as kind of a target. And you can get away with that when your reactions are good. And it's also that stance is very similar to a traditional amateur wrestling stance. He's just not giving you a lot of options for takedowns. It also lets him kind of explode through to surprise you with head kicks and whatnot, but again, just kind of as a by the by. So, let me put it like this. If Sterling can't get takedowns or some kind of control position, I don't know that he can win this fight. If he just has to try and strike it out with TJ, I don't think he wins. But the time off, and this is going to be Dillashaw's just second fight in like 3.5 years. That inactivity is a big consideration. I will not be surprised if Dillashaw wins because I think what he does presents problems specifically for Aljamain Sterling. The length is going to be a problem for Dillashaw to overcome. He has struggled with that a lot, especially guys who know how to manage range. If you can manage the range on him, he struggles. And he whiffs a lot. Again, you look at guys who know distance management. Dominic Cruz made him miss a lot. Heck, the first round of their first fight, Cody Garbrandt makes him miss a lot. He was diligent about that and kind of made it work for him as the second round of that Garbrandt fight came about. And credit to him for that. He was not discouraged by missing a lot. But if he doesn't have either a good read on you or a better ability to kind of cheat distance or get you mistiming it, misranging it, he struggles. Sandhagen did that a lot to him. Sandhagen did that a lot by not just at distance, but kind of by crashing distance pretty constantly and just keeping a ridiculous pace on him. Sterling doesn't have the highest pace, but the ranginess is a problem, and it doesn't take Sterling long, man, to get your back. Doesn't mean he's going to finish you from there, but he can get it. So, I think ultimately I'm going to pick Sterling, but I'm not going to be surprised if, just stylistically, man, TJ offers him problems. So, just paying attention to that one. All right, bantamweights. Sticking with the bantamweight division. Former champion and number one contender by the rankings, Petr Yan, will fight the 13th ranked contender, Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley has stumbled pretty visibly every time he's fought someone who's really good. Marlon Vera did a number on him, and he handled that badly, and he still is in denial about it, but Vera handled him, because Cheeto's very good. Pedro Munoz was disarming him. I'm not saying O'Malley had zero success in that fight, but look at what Munoz was doing, and look at how ineffective most of O'Malley's offense was because of what Munoz was doing. And then we've got Petr Yan, who might still be the best bantamweight in the world. There's an argument there. The range will again be a hurdle he has to overcome. There's a couple of things here. One, O'Malley's a headhunter. And Yan is very good about defense with his head. He's more open to the body, but again, O'Malley doesn't go much to the body. O'Malley shows kicks, but he shows kicks in the way people think Conor McGregor would show kicks. Kicks were an integral part of Conor McGregor's game on his rise, believe it or not. Rewatch his fights, his early fights in the UFC. His kicking game was very important for setting up his punches. In fact, it was vital. Anytime, watch the second Diaz fight in particular. You can see this. You can set your watch to it. Every time Conor is using kicks to set up what he does, he's winning. Every time he stops kicking and just boxes with Nate, he loses. He loses those exchanges, every one of them. When he kicks to steer you and to set you up, he was successful. When he didn't, not so much. O'Malley shows kicks to show kicks. He doesn't really build off of them or steer you with them the way that you need to. He's susceptible to leg kicks. I don't think he's frail in the sense that, oh no, he breaks every time you touch him. He's not that. But his style is susceptible to being kicked and disrupted in that way. And even people he has beaten have disrupted him with leg kicks. I just don't think he has a good answer for it. I think his defense is a bit of a problem. He tends to rely on his length. And that's a bad thing to rely on against Jan, who's pretty good about getting inside. I need a concrete reason to pick against Petr Yan. And I don't think Sean O'Malley offers it. Is it possible for Sean O'Malley to win this fight? Yes. It is possible. It is unlikely, in my judgment. So picking Yan. Lightweights. Great fight here. Beneil Dariush and Mateusz Gamrot. Poor Dariush, man. That dude hasn't lost a fight since 2018. He has beaten since then Thiago Moises, Drew Dober, Frank Camacho, Drakkar Klose, Scott Holtzman, Diego Ferreira, and Tony Ferguson. And if you'll recall some of those are wars. Like that fight with Drakkar Klose, that's a war. He was in the firefight with Scott Holtzman for as long as that lasted. He kind of wrecked Tony on the ground. Dude's on a good run. He should be in the title picture, and he's constantly forgotten about. Mateusz Gamrot, that guy lost his UFC debut, a tough split decision to Guram Kutateladze. Since then, finished Scott Holtzman, finished Jeremy Stevens, finished Diego Ferreira, and in his last fight, had a great fight. If you haven't seen his fight with Arman Tsarukyan, amazing grappling and scrambling between those two. Amazing wrestling. This is a heck of a fight. I'm gonna lean towards Dariush just a bit. Again, just a hair, but don't miss this fight. Like, you could main event any fight night in the world with this fight, and you'd be very happy. It's a great fight for lightweight. And kicking off the pay-per-view card, we have at women's flyweight, Katlyn Chookagian and Manon Fiorot. I've said my piece about Katlyn Chookagian plenty of times. She's on a 4-fight winning streak. I wasn't sure she beat Amanda Hebos her last fight out, but eh. Fiorot has looked really good in the UFC, but has also shown some of the same problems that most female fighters seem to show for whatever reason. I'm going to pick Fiorot here just because I can. I'm very prepared to be wrong about this one, by the way. Katlyn Chookagian doesn't lose very often. She's just hard to beat. But I think Fiorot will engage her in that kind of long-range kickboxing while we ki and do kind of shadow boxing stuff that Chookagian mostly does. I think Fiorot might have an advantage there, actually, because of some of the weapons she uses relative to Chookagian. I would not have opened the card with this one, for the record. I would have swapped this in the next fight we're going to talk about, personally. But I'm going to pick Fiorot, and it's a bit speculative. Could be very, very wrong, but if Fiorot wins, I think she'll be the next title challenger. I think that's what the UFC kind of wants to do. Whereas if Chookagian wins, they might try to do Grasso. Because seriously, anybody out there, do you really want to see Katlyn Chookagian versus Valentina Shevchenko again? Are there any unanswered questions from their first fight? I don't have any. But if she wins 5 in a row, put it this way. If Chookagian gets a stoppage, that will help her cause immensely. But she doesn't finish people. Has she got a single finish win in the UFC? I have to look at this now because this amuses me. No, she does not. Her UFC wins, she came in, beats Lauren Murphy by decision, loses to Carmouche by decision, beats Irene Aldana by decision. I'm sure I agreed with that one. Beats Mauro Romero Barella and Alexis Davis, both by decision. Loses a split decision to Jessica I. LOL. Beats Joanne Calderwood, beats Jennifer Maia, both by decision. That gets her title shot, where she is finished by Valentina Shevchenko. She beats Antonina Shevchenko by decision. Gets stopped by Jessica Andrade in that fight in the first round. Andrade took her soul with body shots. Then her current 4-fight winning streak, Cynthia Calvillo, Viviane Araújo, Jennifer Maia, and Amanda Ribas, all decision. And she has got 2 finishes in her entire career. One was in her second ever fight, and the other one was against someone without a Wikipedia entry in 45 seconds. So if she gets a finish, that will help her cause immensely. I wouldn't bet on it. Picking Fior there, it'll be what it is. All right. Prelims. Good fight here. Bilal Muhammad and Sean Brady. You have 2 guys who are kind of doing the John Fitch thing. And in this case, I do mean the stylistically. Bilal Muhammad is on a very good winning streak, and he gets slept on a lot. He hasn't lost a fight since he fought Jeff Neal in 2019. He is unbeaten in his last 9 fights. 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay, 8. Included in there is a no contest with Leon Edwards from March of last year that he would have lost. And I don't say that because Edwards is the champion now. I say that because rewatch the first round of that fight. That's not only, like, Leon doesn't only win that round, it's not especially close. That fight was not going Bilal Muhammad's way at all. I don't think he was looking for a way out when he said he couldn't see after that. Look, you got eye poked, man. Leon Edwards didn't want that to hang over to have a no contest there. He shouldn't have fouled him. Straight up. But I do think that fight was not going to go his way. But he's on a good streak. He's just... look, if you think his fights aren't terribly compelling, I don't blame you. I don't find them terribly compelling, to be quite honest. But he's tough, and he knows how to win fights, and that matters. Matters a lot. He's fighting one of the rising forces in the division in Sean Brady. Brady is undefeated, 15-0. Had some setbacks against Michael Chiesa a little bit. And again, still won the fight, but struggled a bit in the striking there. This is a very good fight. This is going to come down to, I think, who controls the takedowns, because both guys prefer to fight there. Muhammad is the better striker. He might catch Brady there, but I think this is going to be whoever grinds this one out. I am going to lean towards Brady just a little bit here, but I don't know that that's right. Again, this is a close one. This is a good fight. It's a very good fight. Middleweights. Mahmoud Muradov, who I've been singing his praises for a while, and he had a setback in his last fight against Gerald Meerschaert, a little over a year ago, actually. He had an injury. Yeah, he was supposed to fight earlier and had an injury. Now he's facing Caio Borralho. He looked good against Gerald Meerschaert. He put a beating on him in the first round, but gassed himself out a little bit, and Meerschaert is a very tough fighter if you give him those opportunities. I still am a pretty big believer in Muradov's upside. He lost a long winning streak in that fight. He has a couple of good finishes in the UFC over Trevor Smith and Andrew Sanchez, both knockouts. He's 32, so still a fairly young guy, but probably needs to rebound here. I expect him to. Again, Borralho is no joke, but I'm a pretty big believer in Muradov, as I think I've indicated. Light heavyweights, Nikita Krylov and Volkan Oezdemir. Well, Oezdemir needs a win, huh? He got the win. That fight with Paul Craig sucked. But yeah, he needs a win here. Krylov could also really use a win. He knocked out Alexander Gustafsson in his last fight, but Gustafsson at this point is washed beyond belief. I'm going to lean towards Krylov, I think, but I don't know. Featherweights, Zubaira Tuhugov and Lucas Almeida. I'm going to pick Tuhugov here, but he's a weird guy. He's had some good wins, but he's had some weird losses and other. He was his original rise through the UFC looked like he was going to be more of a force, and he just is not. Like, he debuted in the UFC in 2014, and injuries and time off and whatnot have kind of taken the hype and some of the ceiling away from him. That ceiling has been lowered. Lightweights, I think he's going to win here, but he might drop the ball again. Lightweights, Magomed Mustafayev and Yamato Nishikawa. I'm going to lean towards Mustafayev. I mean, this is another guy who, when he debuted, I thought he was darn good. I mean, his early run through the UFC, he debuted for them in 15. Beating Piotr Hallman, he beat Joe Proctor. Had a tough fight with Kevin Lee where he did okay, but Lee was kind of in the ascendancy in 16. Doesn't fight again until 2019 when he beats Rafael Fiziev actually with a spinning back kick and punches. Drops a tough fight with Brad Riddell. That was in 2020. He was supposed to fight Damir Ismagulov last year, but Ismagulov badly missed weight and that whole thing got scrapped. He was supposed to fight Jamie Malarkey here. That Malarkey pulled out. So again, in steps Nishikawa. I'm going to pick Mustafayev here, but that guy lost a lot of time, and it's kind of sad because he had a lot of ability. Welterweights, Abubakar Nurmagomedov and Omar Gadzhiev. I'm going to have to type one of those names. Ugh. So Abubakar Nurmagomedov, 1-1 in the UFC. I actually think I might lean towards Omar Gadzhiev. Let me double check Gadzi there. Because he's fought in the UFC before. He's 13-1 overall. Lost to Caio Borralho in his UFC debut. Technical decision. I vaguely remember that fight. Yeah, I think I will lean towards Omar Gadzhiev, but I am not sure about that. Let's see. Armen Petrosyan and AJ Dobson. Feels like a safe enough pick for Petrosyan here. Flyweights, Muhammad Makayev and Malcolm Gordon. Poor Malcolm Gordon, man. I mean, he's on a 2-fight winning streak now, but one of those was an arm injury, doohickey. Makayev. He's kind of the uber guy coming up. He's 7-0, had a big undefeated, there's no contest in there, but he had a big undefeated amateur career. This feels like a little bit of a setup for Makayev, and I imagine he'll get the job done. And kicking everything off, Karol Hossa and Lena Landsberg. Yeah. Hossa's coming off of a loss to Sarah McMahon. Landsberg coming off of 2 losses to Sarah McMahon and Pannie Kianzad. On that, I'll just go with Hossa, but who knows? And that's lower level women's bantamweight. That's the card as it currently stands. Really, really, really good main event. I think I heard Chuck Mindenhall reference this actually. If you just kind of remove Jan and O'Malley and just look at the rest of the main card, that's a total of 81 fights without a loss between every fighter. If you add up the undefeated streaks of Oliveira, Makhachev, Sterling, Dillashaw, O'Malley, Dariush, not even O'Malley, but Dariush, Gamrot, Fiore, and Chookagian, you get to like 81. It's stupid. There is so much momentum on this card clashing together. If you include Jan and O'Malley, O'Malley's got a decent enough winning streak, and Jan's only lost one loss was his own doing, and the other a competitive fight with Sterling. It's a very, very strong main card again. I might swap Brady and Muhammad for Chukagian and Fior, but I don't make the cards. Which would actually make those streaks longer because both of them have very long winning streaks. Brady's undefeated, right? 15-0? Yeah, 15-0. And Muhammad, again, unbeaten in like 9 fights. So it's a really good card. I will be covering it this Saturday in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Per usual, please do stop by, say hello. I always appreciate it. All right, let's move on to news such as we have it. The only thing I really want to talk about here is UFC 282. I mentioned already the other card that kind of got shuffled around. It was from November. But 282, this is the December 10th card. We have a couple of fights. We have some fights made for this one. The presumptive main event, I say presumptive, is Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira, a rematch of their fight, bonkers fight, wherein Prochazka scored that last-minute round submission over Teixeira. So we're getting a rematch of that fight. Maybe, when I say best is, it is certainly the most wildly entertaining light heavyweight title fight ever, my opinion. Is it the best? I might still put like Gustafsson and Jones 1 over it. I very much like that fight, but this one a little bit wilder, a little bit more back and forth, and a lot more like fan friendly. So if that's heavier in your criteria, then this might be the top. Currently also on this card, let me run down the card that we currently have, and I'll tell you the good, bad, and the otherwise. Robbie Lawler versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. I expect that fight to fall out in some variety because they tried to make it several times. Edmund Shabazian gets something of a get-well fight against Dalcha Longiambula, but if he drops that one, it might be time to cut bait. Featherweights Billy Quarantillo and Anthony Hernandez. Good fight. TJ Brown and Eric Silva. Meh. Dricus du Plessis and Darren Till. It's a good fight. It's a tough welcome back for Darren Till. I actually like du Plessis. No one cares about Rosenstruck and Dawkins. Middleweights, Joaquin Buckley and Chris Curtis. That might be fun. Let's see. Flyweights, Daniel De Silva and Vinicius Salvador. Meh. Middleweights, Bo Nickel and Jamie Pickett. Bo Nickel's UFC debut. The other couple of fights you need to pay attention to. There's one other bantamweight bout between... Oh, Ronnie Lawrence is back. Good for him. He'll probably win that one. But we have a light heavyweight fight between... I imagine this is serving as the backup. One half of this is serving as the backup for the main event. Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev. It's a good fight. The winner of that should be your next title challenger. I kind of like Ankalaev's chances there, actually. And your sad, sad, sad fight of the evening will be Ovince St. Preux versus Alexander Gustafsson. Just why? Just why? Like when they announced this, the UFC's like tagline for this was two of the most seasoned fighters in the division. Like if seasoned means, riddled with bad knockout losses and 5 years past their prime. I mean, St. Preux, like he got a almost BS split decision win over Shogun earlier this year. Been stopped in 2 fights before that. Like the guy's just got more losses than wins in his last several fights. And then Gustafsson, man. I feel bad for that guy. I thought he beat Daniel Cormier when they fought for the belt. I really do. I really did. And every time afterwards. I rewatched that fight. I still scored for Gustafsson. But Gustafsson is on a 4-fight losing streak and hasn't won since he styled on Glover Teixeira, though. 2017. Knocked him out in the 5th round. That was a brutal fight. But since then, he got smashed by John Jones in their rematch. He got beat up and submitted by Anthony Smith. He got quickly run over by Fabricio Verdum, and Nikita Krylov knocked him out back in July of this year. This is just sad. This is just a sad fight. Here's the other thing about UFC 282. Normally, I wouldn't report on this because this is one of those things that I have just started to tune out. But enough people who talk to the right people are mentioning this. The UFC is apparently trying to get John Jones on this card in his heavyweight debut. Now, talk of Francis Ngannou maybe. That's somewhat pursuant to Ngannou's knee being better after he had to get surgery on it. If not Ngannou, then Stipe Miocic. At this point, again, like John's talked about moving to heavyweight so much over so long a period of time, I kind of tune it out. But again, the right people are kind of saying that this is something that's being worked towards. Will it actually come to fruition? I don't know. But we'll keep an eye on that one, because if you tack on to the rest of this card John Jones in a heavyweight title fight, be that full belt or interim, because if he fights Stipe, there's going to be an interim belt on the line, especially given Ngannou's potential leaving. That's going to, I guarantee you. That would be a big deal. Be a very big deal. Again, nothing known yet, so that's all I'm going to mention is it's being discussed, and it's being reported by people who would know this is more than just idle Twitter gossip. So, UFC 282 really starting to take shape. I believe that's the last pay-per-view of the year. Yes, it is. 283 is in January. So, keeping an eye on that. All right, let me check Twitter one last time, see if anything crazy is broken. If not, we will do plugs and get out of here. All right, nope, so plugs. I have 2 podcasts this week. Tuesday for Damn You Hollywood, myself, Mark Radulich, and Jason? I want to say Jason Teasley. Myself, Mark Radulich, Jason Teasley, and... Is that Ronnie Adams? Might be Ronnie Adams. We will be reviewing Halloween Ends. I don't have a lot good to say about it. So tune in, and we will have at it. Yeah, that is Ronnie. Then Wednesday, I will be participating in a TV party tonight for The Midnight Club. That's the new Mike Flanagan show on Netflix, based on the work of Christopher Pike. That is myself and Alexis Haina. Yeah. So be on the lookout for that if you're interested in my podcast. I have more thoughts. I got to finish that, actually. I'm most of the way through it, but I got to finish it. So be on the lookout for that. If you're interested in some of my other thoughts on things besides MMA, movies and television on occasion, should be a good one. Damn You Hollywood, week after for Black Adam. Will be on a Monday because Mark's schedule for the month of October is weird. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. Last week, let me pump this real fast. I was part of the Damn You Hollywood for the new Hulu Hellraiser. That was myself, Mark Radulich, and Sean Comer. That particular iteration of the Triumvirate got together. So if you want our thoughts on that, the good, the bad, and the otherwise, and there's a little bit of all of that to discuss in that particular movie. Give that a listen. Anywhere you're listening to this, type in Damn You Hollywood, and you should be able to find my podcast over there. The usual spate of professional wrestling coverage is, of course, up this week as well. That's AEW's Dark Elevation on Monday. MLW, if they release something on Thursday. WWE SmackDown on Friday. And then the UFC event on Saturday. Again, more of an early morning thing on Saturday. So, tune in for any and all of that if you are at all inclined to do so. Could run for office with how well I speak. Yeah. All right. On that note, thank you very, very much, everyone. As always, I appreciate you. Please do stay safe out there. We will be back next week to review UFC 280. And we will preview UFC on ESPN Plus 71. Currently headlined by Calvin Kattar and Arnold Allen. Look. At the Apex, right? Yeah, that's an Apex card. You don't even have to look at it. That's an Apex card. What do we got? But there is not much. Jared Vandera is on your main card. That ought to tell you a lot. Dustin Jacoby and Khalil Roundtree might actually be okay. Drakkar Klose and Mark Madsen should not be on a prelim card. Andre Arlovsky's fighting. You know what? All I'm going to say about Arlovsky is God bless him, the man makes like $300,000 a fight. You know, I mentioned this before. Like, Any one of these cards that's like got, 5 or 6 fights that are just like Contender Series alum versus each other before they get their second deal, you could pay the cost for Andrei Arlovsky at this point is equivalent to basically a card filled with Contender Series alums still on their like 10 and 10 or 12 and 12 deal. That's oh man, Jake Matthews this week. With Sam Alvey gone, someone had to step up and start shamelessly defending the UFC, and it seems Jake Matthews is the one who decided to do it. Some other guys kind of supporting him, like, boy, this is, I'm in the UFC now, and I'm so much better off than I was when I was making like, $14 an hour. The point isn't that you're not doing better than you were at a part-time or an hourly wage job. The point is you should be doing so much better than you are. You guys, fighters, hear me. This is the only thing I'm going to say about this. Hear me on this, please. Look at how much UFC executives make. Look at it. Look at how much you make. Not just you, not just necessarily even just you as an individual. Like, you guys get less than 20% revenue. That's it. And you're defending this because you're better off than you were, which is true. You are. I have no doubt that you're better off than you were. You're limiting your ceiling. That's what you're doing to yourselves. Defending the practices that the UFC has right now is limiting your ceiling because you all of you, should be making so much more. Straight up. The UFC gets a giant check from ESPN for putting on 40 some odd events a year, and you see none of it. You should be getting about, ideally, 50% of that check. How big is that check each year? Like 700 million? Yeah, so if we take half of that, say 300 million for the sake of argument. Take that and split it, even if you split it evenly. If you take that segment of the revenue and you split that evenly between the rest of the fighters, how much more are you making a year? Take $300 million, divide it by, 500 fighters on the roster? So we're a little less than $1 million extra per fighter. Somewhere in $700,000 a year more range-ish? That's just math off the top of my head, so I'm probably wrong, and anyone who wants to do the math is free to do so. That's how much more you should be making a year. And you're not, and you won't, because you won't change it. Off my soapbox. All right, that's it. Thank you all again. See you next week. Until then, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.